Hello friends, this is the Organizer Advisor here to help you enhance your happiness and transform your life. Okay, so I got a couple of comments and messages and emails about kind of making some cheap eats using the food that we have on hand. You can see that right there is my pantry. You can see that little area right there. That's my pantries. I don't keep a lot of food on hand because I really don't like to waste money or food. So I have a plan at the end of every month. I take an inventory of what I have that needs to be used, and I develop my menu around that. Just a package of chicken wings and drumettes, and I baked them last night in keto friendly, for those of you who want to go low carb, keto friendly chipotle seasoning. Now this is wings, drumettes, and a couple of thighs. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this. Now, we could just eat these the way they are, just heat them up and eat, but I'm going to actually use quite a bit of this to make some chicken, either wraps or quesadillas. And then I'm going to debone it all. I'm going to put my bone in here, make some chicken stock, and then I'm going to use some of the wing meat to make a chicken vegetable noodle soup. So a couple of things I just want to show you that I'm using. I do have some keto friendly tortillas. I have the whole wheat version and the little less wheat version. I have a couple of things of broccoli. My husband doesn't like broccoli. It's not that he doesn't like the taste, he doesn't like the concept of broccoli. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to boil that in my chicken stock before I add the meat to it. I am going to puree the chicken stock in my blender to disguise a little bit of the broccoli evidence. I also have like a handful of carrots here, this little baby carrots, and then I have some low fat mozzarella cheese for quesadillas. I'm also using a can of diced tomatoes and green chilies. When I made green chili for my husband, I had an extra can of that. So you can tell I'm just pulling these ingredients together. I have an onion here. I also have another onion over there that I'm going to use a little later. But also I have a head of cabbage, some iceberg lettuce, and I'll show you how I chop that up, and some shredded carrots. So I'm going to make like a shredded lettuce to go with the wraps, but then I'm also going to make shredded cabbage coleslaw. Going to hold us over for the next couple of days. Very inexpensive. I think the chicken I had it was about 5 pounds of chicken I got for about $6. So I'm going to start there, and I'm going to show you kind of the process in little snippets. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to chop up these vegetables. I'm going to chop up the onions, and I'm not going to finely dice them because remember, I'm going to puree this before I put the chicken meat in. So I'm going to throw this in to make the stock. I have about 6 cups of boiling water. Salt water, I'm using Redmond's real salt. This is mineralized salt. I also use Celtic salt and Himalayan sea salt. Those are the only salts I use. But today I'm using Redmond's real salt for the salt water. All right, let's finish chopping up these onions. I don't know if you can see. Yeah, you can. Yay. Just doing a rough chop because, like I said, I'm going to actually puree that. It's going to be more like a creamy chicken soup. I'm going to add some spices to it, some turmeric, and you won't even see the vegetables, which really makes me happy because I can feed it to my husband with a vegetable incognito. He eats like 3 vegetables, green beans, corn, on, you know, like whole kernel and not creamed. But that's another thing you could put in here if you need to kind of front load your food with vegetables to disguise it incognito. You can always add vegetables and puree the whole thing, because if they can't see it, they don't know it's in there. And I get kale in my family a lot by just simply cooking it and then pureeing. So throw in a few green vegetables that they will eat, and they think that's where the color comes from. So hate to be sneaky about it, but you know, sometimes people have aversions to food they're not allergic to. They just don't like them. Now, all the little scraps, I'm going to cook the stems of this broccoli since I'm going to puree it. I'm going to use as much as I can, but whatever I don't use goes outside to my chickens, so then they eat nutritious vegetables and food, and then they give that right back to me in high quality, nutritious eggs. So we use fresh eggs from the farm here, and I have about, I have about 9 hens, lavender Orpingtons, and if you want to go to my Ravenswood Cottage Facebook page, you'll see all of my favorite pets and my fur family. But we do have, I have lavender Orpingtons, and I also have some little banties, some grizzles, and then I have one blind hen, Helen the hen. You can see her saga. I rescued her, and she has her own little feeding station, and she has a wind chime above her house that's solar activated, so when it's dusk, the wind chime slows down, and then she's able to find the house at night so that she doesn't get too far away from the house. So before I lock her in, I'll be able to find her, because she does tend to wander, but the wind chime, I have it on a solar activating spinner, so it constantly moves. So during the day, she can find the house if she needs to for the rain, or if she just wants to go back to the house for safety. But at night, when it's time to go to roost, then she can find it. So enough about Helen the hen. All right, so I have in here carrots and onions and broccoli and some salt. So I'm just going to cook that. I'll add the spices later, but I want to get started on the chicken. So let me just give this a rinse. Now we're going to start with taking the meat off the chicken, and then I'm going to throw it into this little bowl, and then I'm going to throw the bones into the stock pot to make some chicken stock. Now, is the stock and the vegetables with just the bones from the chicken. A little bit of meat left on the bones, but I have plenty. So I'm going to cover that and let that simmer for a couple hours and get all the flavor out of those bones. Now, I'll remove the bones, but if I really, really, really wanted to use those, I could dry them in my oven and then grind them and put them into my garden, which I usually do with my turkeys for Thanksgiving and Christmas. But I could also put them in a pressure cooker and cook them until they're absolutely macerated, and then blend them and use that as a bone broth. Very nutritious. So here is the chicken. So that's quite a bit of meat for just those cheap, inexpensive wings and drumettes and things. I'm going to take some of this meat and reserve it for my chicken soup. But the other part of it is I'm going to cook part of it in this tomatoes and green chilies mix to make it kind of a nice spicy insert for my chicken wraps or chicken quesadilla. What I do now is I'm going to take part of this chicken meat and I'm going to put it into, and this is just rough chopped. I didn't want to make it too fine. I'm just going to put part of it into the pot to mix with the green chilies. And then I'm going to leave a little bit more, even though there's going to be some meat on this, I want some chunky meat. So this is going to go into the soup a little later. This is going to go into the quesadillas or the wraps, whichever we decide. Wraps for lunch, quesadillas for dinner. And then the soup I can freeze and use as a heat and eat meal when I get super, super busy. So this is just a can of tomatoes and green chilies. I'm actually going to drain that. I'm going to drain it right into my pot here. And whatever I don't use, I'll throw in there. Not going to hurt to add more flavor. Okay, that's perfect. The rest can go in there. Another suggestion that I have for stretching your food budget is make similar ingredient meals. Like, for example, oh, that added a really nice bit of color to that. If you want to extend the grocery items that you purchase, let's say, for example, you're going to do Taco Tuesday night. Well, you could buy some nacho chips and make loaded nachos with the same types of ingredients. That way, if you buy an entire jar of picante sauce and you only use a little bit, you could use the rest of that jar throughout the week if you use similar ingredients. So you could do more of a, taco themed for the week. I'm going to add a little bit of this to this saute, and I'll let you see what it looks like. It's going to have tons of flavor, but I'm going to save some for the quesadillas or the wraps, because it just is so good. All right, let's turn this on to get that going. If I had just a little residual here and I wanted to add it to this, it's not going to hurt. So remember, that chicken has a chipotle flavoring to it, so it's just going to enhance the flavors. So this way I'm using everything. This is not going to linger. I like to write the date that I open my condiments so I know how long they've been in there, so I make sure I use them so I don't waste food, and then recycle these containers. Okay, let me show you what this looks like. You could put some black beans in here if you want to extend it. You could put some red beans in there. You could put some onions and green pepper. And so then we have a little bit of this. I'll put this in a bowl. Use this. I like to get every little bit out. But even if I don't, I'm going to show you a little quick tip. You got to rinse it to recycle it anyway. You might as well get that flavor out. I'm going to do the same thing to the can. And so this is getting my money's worth. Those go into the recycling. Okay. Got that vent on there. I'm going to move this so it doesn't melt. And so I have a little bit of picante sauce to add for later. I'll cover that with some kitchen wrap and put that in the fridge. I'll cover the cheese while all of this cooks. I'm going to set these aside. This is going to be multiple meals. So for grocery items that I may have just wasted if I let them linger too long, I am able to really capitalize on my grocery investment, making sure I use as much as the food as possible. Now, process of going through and making sure that I use it before, the expiring date, like no freezer burn. Here's a little tip. I don't know if you knew, but when you get lettuce, of course, you want to take off the overt leaves, and this is my chickens love lettuce. Okay, so I'm comfortable there. Look at all that good green stuff. If you are going to store a head of lettuce, you need to remove this, because the longer this stays in, the more bitter your lettuce tastes. So, of course, the old trick is smack, and then There you go, see? And now you can pick up a few more of those leaves. You can chop it, you can cut it. I'm gonna chop it so it has kind of a consistent layered look. And here's a few shredded carrots. I'm gonna end up putting these in my cabbage, but in case I want a few to go in my wrap, to give it a little bit of crunch, there we go. Okay, so there we go. That's chicken wrap plate. We have the cheese here. We have the condiment here. I'm just going to remove the outer leaves. Cabbage is so good for you. I used to just, so I'm only going to cut about half of this. I'm going to cut it into wedges. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to save those for later. That's going to be a saute, most likely. A little chickpeas with bacon and sauteed cabbage. That's delicious. Another one of my really cheap and easy meals. Okay, so I'm just rough chopping this kind of like I did the lettuce. And yes, I do have a cookbook. I'm just about finished. It's almost ready to go to the publisher. I'm doing the final edits and aligning the photographs with it. And then it hopefully will be available on Amazon, called What's Cooking at Ravensdew Cottage. Okay, so this is just a rough chop. The nice thing about it is if we have quesadillas or if we do the chicken wraps and we have some of these leftover vegetables, the peppers, the onions, and the carrots can go right into the soup. So I'm not even wasting those. Okay, so I think I have enough carrots in here. Now you could add some, might even add some purple onion to this. Yeah, I think I will. And I have these leftover carrots. Where do you think they're going? Because remember, I have some reserved for the wraps. Chickens love these too. They love the shredded carrots. Just adding more nutrition to the soup. This looks really, really good. I'll show you in just a second. Okay. So now I'm just going to drizzle this with ranch dressing. Soup, you can see. All that goodness in there. And then here is the inside of the quesadillas or wraps. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drain this. That way it's not too watery for the wraps or the quesadillas, but it still has, that chicken is now infused not only with that keto chipotle seasoning that I baked it with, but it also has a really nice flavor from those tomatoes and chilies and a little bit of that picante sauce. So motivate your culinary desire. So there's some really good flavor. Seasoning, right there we go. Okay, pureeing the broth so that I can add the additional chicken. Now, most of the chicken meat is off of these bones, but I want to make sure I get all of the bones out before I puree. I will make sure there is no wasted chicken on these bones. So once these cool, I will pull off the rest of the chicken if there's any lingering. Okay, so I have hence removed all the recognizable items of broccoli, and I'm going to puree them with some of the other vegetables. The soup, all the bones have been removed. So now I have stock and some minor vegetables, no recognizable broccoli. Now I'm just going to puree this. I'm going to pop it right back in. Here's some I've already done, but I did make thicker base stock. And as I'm going to add back in my chicken. This is the chicken I and I will let this simmer for a little while.